Jack, and I'm GadellNet's training and development leader. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I am pleased to introduce our very own Power BI expert, Adam Steht. He's our business analyst and will be celebrating 5 years with GadellNet this coming Sunday, actually. He's consulted with several of our clients on the benefits of Power BI and is also actively working on some Power BI projects where he has been very successful at showing them ways to improve their data management and create efficiencies while doing so. Feel free to use the chat function during the webinar today to ask questions, and Adam will be able to address those questions after the presentation. And we are recording our webinar today, so we'll make sure we get that recording sent out after the call. And without further ado, Adam, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. Sorry again for the delay this morning. I've got a new computer in the last few days and just can't seem to get every little thing I need installed when I need it. So thanks for bearing with me here. So today what I want to do is talk about really the goal is to make sure that everyone leaves the call and understands that Power BI is not scary, right? That it's not this big beast that can't be tamed and that it's not something that you can't leverage within your business, right? So it is a big tool. It's a complex tool. It can be complex, but you can certainly start from the ground up and learn very quickly the nuts and bolts of it, which we'll do some of that today. Some of the feedback that we've gotten when we've done things like this in the past, whether it's a lunch and learn maybe you attended or something, is that more hands-on, right? So it's great to talk about things in theory, but let's kind of see it in action. So we'll do that a little bit here. We'll walk through, as you see the agenda here, that the ecosystem of Power BI, there's really three main parts to the front end of Power BI that we'll talk about. And then demo, show you that and talk through some situations and scenarios and connect to some data. Look and write some formulas and kind of get a feel for the interfaces and the different interfaces that you'll see in whether you're working with Power BI now or if you do in the future. And then even give you a list of some tools that I use on a daily basis and that are pretty popular in the Power BI world for tips and tricks and tools and all kinds of things, right? So that's really the goal and the agenda. So without further ado there. So what's Power BI? Likely most of you know this. This is a description right off Microsoft's website, right? So I can't claim this, but it's an analytics solution that allows you to connect to model or build data sets, right? Model your data so that it's usable. That's a key in being able to present data is that it's queryable, right? So you model it in a way that you can query it and make sense of it and add value. And then a way that you can visualize that data and collaborate with it. So we'll kind of walk through each piece of that today, certainly in the demo. And there are different ways to do this, right? This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. There's different ways to where you start, whether you start in the Power BI desktop or in the service, right? How you store your files, whether they're local on a machine or they're in OneDrive or they're in Dropbox, right? There's a lot of different ways that folks handle data. And so this tool is pretty powerful in making use of all of that right out of the box. So talking about the ecosystem, Power BI Desktop. That is an app that's installed in your local machine. It is free. You do not have to have a Power BI license to download Power BI Desktop. You can go to powerbi.com. I can show you here in a moment. Go to Power BI the Power BI Desktop option. Maybe it asks you to enter your email or something, so Microsoft can follow up with a sales call. And then you download the tool and you can use it, right? So if you want to use it for your own personal use and just play around, no reason you can't do that, assuming you have the ability to download apps to your work machine. So this is where most reports are created and then published from the desktop to the service, which again, we'll see here shortly. And there's a few reasons why most reports should start in the desktop, and I can explain those as we start to dig in, but that's the best practice. That's the way I always do that. You're not gaining benefit really by starting in the service, but you can certainly lose that. So if you want to connect directly to data via the web interface, you lose some of the functionality that you do have with the Power BI desktop app. And they work so seamlessly together that there's really not a great reason not to start there from my perspective. So again, that's where most reports and most data is going to come in, and most reports are going to start. And then the most common uses for the desktop tool are really, they run the gamut, right? The full gamut of what we're trying to do is connect to our data. We can transform data in the desktop tool, so we can do data modeling right in the tool via Power Query, which again is a language that's been around for a while and a platform that's been around for a while. They've really just built that into the Power BI platform. Again, takes some learning, but they've also put a GUI or an interface on the desktop tool that allows you to not have to write code, right? So you can point and click, and it's doing that in the background for you, which again we can see here shortly. But data modeling certainly there, creating visuals, the reports that you want, and then sharing those. So publishing those to the service, and that's what I mean when I say they work so seamlessly together. You start at the desktop, you'll see me log in at the desktop so it knows who I am, right? So it knows where it needs to publish to. And you publish in, a couple clicks in 30 seconds or less, 15 seconds, your data is available on the web. So we'll walk through that here shortly. So that's the Power BI desktop. The service, when I refer to, or when you hear the Power BI service referred to, that's just basically the web interface at app.powerbi.com, you see. There. So that's what's referred to as the Power BI service, because it's a web service application. There, you can connect to data. You can create reports there, but you cannot model data there, right? So if you need to write formulas and do some number crunching and model data and clean up data, you're not going to be able to do that in the service directly. So if you connect to an Excel file directly there, you can consume the Excel file exactly the way you pulled it in. That's it. You cannot write formulas over the top of it or model it in any fashion. So that's a big downfall, right? Certainly for folks that are doing that, business analysts and folks on the front line, not the IT or tech folks in the background. But if you want to do some light data modeling, the desktop tool is where that needs to happen. So, and it's also the main platform for collaboration, right? As I said, there is a way to really use this Power BI platform without a license, where if you download Power BI desktop and so does your partner, you could send them your report file and they can open it on their end and see it. Pretty clunky way of doing things. That's kind of the old school way of things we're trying to get away from with Power BI. So the collaboration happens really in the service, where you publish to the web and then you can create and share reports and dashboards to folks where they just log into the web and consume it, right? They don't need the desktop tool, they just need to consume it. And that's where that happens, is at app.powerbi.com, which again, we'll see here in just a bit. And here's just a comparison. I thought this was a decent visual to kind of give you an idea that, the both in the middle, you can create reports and visualizations and things like that, but the desktop is much more robust, as you'll see in transforming and shaping and modeling, right? You see transforming, shaping, modeling, creating measures or formulas and calculated columns all on the Power BI desktop side. You see none of that in the Power BI service side on the right, right? So hopefully I can put some context to some of this in the next little bit here. But again, I thought this was a good way to visualize this. The other key here, if you'll see on the left, Power BI desktop, the very bottom line there says RLS creation. That means row level security. So if you need to put any security around your data set, let's say I'm only allowed to see the data that's assigned to me. Let's say I'm a salesperson, right? So Adam should only see his customer data, right? We can do that, but again, we have to start in Power BI desktop to set those rules up so that when we publish it to the service and I log in, I only see my data. That's all possible. But again, another reason why just using Power BI desktop as your default starting point makes all the sense in the world and kind of removes any gotchas down the road. The other, one more main thing that, again, we can look at here that's very valuable in starting with Power BI desktop, at least at this point, if you create a report in Power BI desktop and publish it to the web, you can then download that report file from the web. So let's say you lose it, your server blows away, something you need it immediately. you can't find it. If you've started it in Power BI Desktop and published it to the web, there will be an option to download it. That's in beta, but from what I've seen, it works perfectly. I've done it a few times as a test and no issues. But if you start the report in the service, you cannot pull a copy of it down locally. Again, another reason to start in the desktop. And those might not seem like significant things if you haven't dabbled or you're not very familiar with Power BI or you don't have a very good, strong use case. But trust me that those are super valuable when you start to dig in and get your hands dirty and start implementing this type of stuff within your companies. So with that, Power BI Mobile is the last piece, is really just a presentation layer. But the cool thing here is there are native apps, and that we can basically create a report view just for mobile. So if I'm looking at this on a desktop, a particular report, and it might have 4 or 5 tables or charts or graphs, I can customize a view of that particular page just for mobile. So when I'm looking at a mobile, tabular data and tables isn't terribly consumable, right? When you're on a phone, not easy to consume. So maybe we just don't care to see that. We want to see the high-level KPI numbers or something like that. We can configure the view, and it's smart enough to know, hey, you're on mobile, you only want to see these 3 things based on the view you created, right? So that's a pretty cool feature that you've got folks on the go or in the field. Takes some dialing in, but I think it's a pretty cool one when you get down the road a bit, as well as push notifications. So as data changes, you can sign up for emails. You can get emails too in the service. If data changes in a report, you'll get an email that then just really has a link back to the report in the service. So it's not emailing you the report per se. It'll give you a snapshot or a screenshot of it, but you really have to go dig back into the service and log in to digest or consume what those changes were, to understand them. Push notifications to your phone, though, you can just get a notification, right, if data changes, and then tap on it, and it'll take you right to that dashboard or report. So a couple pretty cool features there that, again, as you start implementing this stuff and play around with it, it can be valuable if you find the right use case and implementation for it. So those are kind of the 3 big front end, what we call the Power BI ecosystem. And to stop there for a second, I mean, the reason I say the 3 from the Power BI ecosystem is because, as you'll see, there are a lot of other tools that integrate with Power BI. Data sources, right? That's all technically part of the Power BI ecosystem. Anything that you can connect into it becomes part of your ecosystem, right, of the platform. Power BI, those are the 3 tools really that they present specifically labeled Power BI, right? So that's the reason I say that's the 3, the triangular ecosystem. But you'll see here there's a lot. There's 80 plus, maybe more now, data sources native that we can connect to and grab data from and start to model. So let's go ahead and do that. And so for today, what I've done is I've just created some dummy data, and I'm going to connect to some Excel and Access data. As you'll see here, all of the options. There's certainly services that you can connect to, whether it's Google Analytics, Facebook, Twitter, Smartsheet, Microsoft, obviously a lot of the Microsoft applications, where basically you click that connector and authenticate to it with your credentials. And assuming you have access to the data, it's going to just start pulling the data in and create some default reports and dashboards for you. So that's one of the big benefits, is that some of those native, what I call native connectors, right, are built for you. Those are super powerful and easy to use, right? A good starting point if you've got a little place to play around. So today I'm using Excel and Access because those are easy to handle and easy to get to. And so what I want to do is, what we'll walk through is connect to that data, create some visuals, maybe write a few formulas just so you understand kind of how that works and the languages that are used to write formulas. Very similar to Excel. So hopefully it's not terribly shocking or new to folks. And if it is, that's okay. Most folks are familiar with Excel, which is why this is a pretty good tool and why folks take to it pretty quickly, because they understand sums and averages and all of those things you've probably done for years and years in Excel. You can basically do the similar stuff here. So the learning curve isn't as steep just to get off the ground. So what you're seeing here is the Power BI desktop tool. And again, it's a local app. It's on my machine. And your ribbon, again, much like the Microsoft products across the top here, you'll notice this Get Data button. And so that's the place to start if you want to start connecting to data. And you'll see when I click that, it kind of gives me some of their the most common options, but you'll notice the button at the bottom is more, and that gives me the full list of all of the connectors, right, that it allows me to connect to, right? So there's all of them there, and then they have them separated out here too by category as well. And so what I'll do is if I go to File here, Excel, right? So there's different types of files. You can certainly go to the folder level as well and see what's in a folder. But what I want to do is go to Excel, and then what it's going to do is just open up, right, my local my machine and let me select a file here, right? So again, there are way better ways to do this, much better ways, let me say, to do this. You know, storing files in OneDrive so that they're always up to date, right? That's a pretty good best practice. And then connect to the file there, right? So that you know you always have up-to-date data. But for this example, I'm just going to use a local file that I created called sales reps. And when I click on that, it's going to establish a connection. And it's going to give me a preview. If there were 50 tabs in that file, each tab is going to have it. Each tab will show up here, and I can just click that and see a preview of the data, right? So what you'll see here is just this is a sales reps table. So the context of this is you know, a pharmaceutical distributor, right? Is the context of this, and so we're going to have sales reps and doctors and products, or you know, and drugs, for lack of a better term, that we'll do some analysis around here. And so the sales reps data is sitting in an Excel file. And so what I have to do is just select that, and then I can load it here, right? I can just load that, that table, and you'll see it'll do a little work here, create a connection to the file, and this one should be pretty quick because there's only a few rows there. You'll notice this fields pane over here now has that table, and here's all of the data, right? Here's my visualizations pane. So this is kind of the key when you start to build visualizations. Here they are. That your list of visualizations are all right here listed for you. And then to start creating, if we want to do that, we just click one of those and it shows up, and I can start to drag and drop fields right into this values or directly onto the visual. So if I want the email address there it is, right? So I'll just do this quickly to show you that data came in, and then we'll go back and connect to the rest of our data. But here you go, right? And I can drag and drop these in order, right? And they reorder. So all of that good stuff. You'll notice that Microsoft does try to be too smart sometimes. You'll notice that there's an ID I have assigned to each sales rep here, but what it's done when I drop that in is it converted that, and it's assuming that I want to see a count of the IDs. You'll see here, when you open a field, you have all these options, kind of standard calculations you can do without writing formulas. But what you'll notice is it said, oh, he wants a count there. Well, no, I don't. I don't want to summarize that. I actually want to see each person's unique ID. And there you go, right? So you see it just went from a count here. Now it's back to count. There's one on each row, back to the actual ID. So those are some, again, gotchas you'll learn as you go along, that sometimes Microsoft is too smart and tries to do a lot for you, that then you might have to reverse out a little bit if you start to see, you know, some funky data or things you're not expecting. So with that, I will do just a little more rearranging here and move the email address down. So there we go. We have ID, and I can sort that by 1 through 6. First name, last name, email address, and mobile phone number of all of our sales reps is the first thing we need. And so then what I'm going to do is the second data source, and the reason I'm doing this way is just to show you that you can take data from different sources and use it all together. That's one of the big powerful features of using a tool like this is, you know, this next piece of data is actually in an Access database. So you'll notice I have my Pharma X Access database that I'll pull data from there as well. And so what's there is actually my doctors, my products, and some sampling data. So they've provided samples. My sales reps have provided samples out to my doctors. And so I've got some data around, you know, the doctors, who the doctors are, our products, and the samples. And this is a pretty straightforward data structure. I mean, this is pretty standard to have. And then what we'll do is relate this data and create some visuals here quickly, write some formulas. So again, at any point, if you have questions, you want me to stop or show something in, feel free to drop a comment, and I can do that in real time here. So what I'm going to do, I've already pulled sales reps from an Excel file, so I'm not going to pull that. I'll leave that unselected here. And then I'm just going to hit load. And what you'll notice, again, as it churns through, those tables are going to populate over here to the right as soon as they're done, which, again, it's going to take pretty short amount of time. So there you go. So here's my sales reps from Excel, and here are my 3 other tables: doctors, products, and samples given. Those all came from, if you recall, those all came from the Access database. But once they're in Power BI, it's all the same, right? So it's just data that now that I can look at and play with. So, again, a similar exercise here to show the data's there. What I did there is I just clicked on that visual and just copy and pasted it, and then I can just swap the data out, right? So I can just put brand, dosage, ID, and then get rid of these others. Of course, again, it thinks I want a count of my ID, which I don't. I just want to see the ID, right? So there's my drug list. So that's how easy it is. Again, a lot of times I do these kinds of things just for validation to make sure the data came in okay and that I got the right table or that kind of stuff. Just some quick, let me take a look at the data. You could also do that by going over here. You'll notice my ribbon on the left. I've got my visuals, my data, and then here's my relationships, my modeling, which we'll look at here in just a couple minutes. But what you'll notice is I can also just highlight this option, the table option, data option here, and then change my tables, and it'll show me that data here as well, right? Now, because I have a few rows here, it's fine. But if I have, let's say 1 million rows or something, not terribly useful, other than to see, the data came in. I don't have a bunch of blank cells or something, right? So, but the point here is you can get a quick gauge on, yep, my data's in. I got what I need here, right? So I've got doctors, products, samples given, and sales reps. And so obviously, in order to use this data together now, I have to relate it in some form or fashion. Now, if you're connecting to maybe either a SQL database or other databases, Power BI oftentimes will and has the ability to, you select the option to basically select related tables or maintain relationships. And if that data is related in the database, it will remain related the same way into your Power BI model. So again, super helpful. You don't have to start from scratch. But in this case, if we have data coming from 2 systems, it's not going to be related by default. We would have to relate it somehow, ideally on a key, which we have here, IDs, right, that we can relate on, which we'll do here in just a moment. And so what I'll do is I'm just going to get rid of these 2 visuals. Just click those, and you can hit delete on your keyboard, and they'll go away. And what I want to do, you'll notice here now, talking about a little bit about what we see is there's a lot. We can hit refresh here, and what that'll do, if I do that, is it's just going to refresh those files that I connected to. No data has changed, so not terribly valuable. But let's say I go add a record to one of those files and save it. If I hit refresh here, it's going to consume that new data and populate it for me. So pretty standard, straightforward functionality there. The bigger key, what I want to talk about here is when we talk about modeling. So this is when we said we need to build our data set. Maybe we need to write formulas and connect our data. This is where a lot of that work happens, right? So in the modeling tab. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is relate this data, right? And I'm going to guess Microsoft, yep, as it does, tried to relate the data for me, which is inaccurate. And we can talk through why this is all inaccurate. So if we look, our products are not assigned to doctors, but Microsoft saw an ID here and an ID here and said, oh, those must be related. Well, they're not. Products aren't related to doctors. So when you go manage relationships, it gives you options, right? I can edit that relationship, highlight it and edit it, delete it, whatever I want to do. So for that one, I want to delete that relationship. Again, it's just the relationship. I'm not deleting the data. I'm just deleting the relationship between the 2. So anyway, so now what I'm actually going to do is start from scratch. So I'll delete all of these that it gave me. Some of these may be okay. It may actually work correctly in some cases, but I want to, just as an example, walk through some of this. So in the samples given table, you'll notice we have these sales rep, doctor, product. These are keys or identifiers that allow us to tie back to our other tables, right? So for instance, this sales rep column, what I can do is say, now give me my sales reps, and I want to relate the sales rep ID, the sales rep column. I highlight it, right? It's gray. And then I click the column here, and I'm saying I want to tie these 2 tables together on this ID. Sales reps goes to sales rep. And then these options are fine. It auto defaults these. Again, we can get into more detail there, or you could start playing around with that. Do we allow them to cross filter? Is it a many to many, a one to one? What kind of relationship is it? And is the relationship active? And I want to say yes, pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and create all the relationships that we need here. So we'll do the same thing with doctor, right? So we want to know this sample was given to what doctor? Well, we know it's Dr. 3, but maybe we want to show their name and get the other data about the doctor in a report or a visual. So again, we click doctor and the ID on the doctor table. And then the last one, I believe, we're going to need is products. So here we see a product identifier, and we want to select the product identifier here and relate those two tables. So there we go, right? So now we have those relationships defined. And now what you'll notice is if I hit my relationships tab over here, it also gives you a visual of how my tables are related, right? So this is another view of that. This is easier to, when you want to view and kind of understand the relationships, this is an easy way to do that. Creating them in this fashion, you can do that. It's, you can drag and drop fields between the tables. It's just not as precise. And so you end up having, a lot of times I end up having to edit the relationship anyway to make sure I've connected the right fields. So if I know what my relationships are going to be, it's a lot easier for me to just create them here. And then if I want to visualize that, right, I can just hit my model option on the ribbon on the left, and it'll show me what I related. And it also shows you, again, what type is this? This is a one-to-many relationship. One doctor, you see here, is many samples, can have many samples associated. Same thing with products and reps. So again, all pretty straightforward stuff if you kind of understand databases and relationships and things like that. So now that this data is related, what we can do, and actually the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save here in case something happens. And I'm just going to save this to my desktop. Ideally, you'd save it to a place that's backed up, right? So let's go ahead and save that. And now we can start modeling the data a little bit, right? So the first thing I want to do is here's my sales reps, and you see here I have first name and last name, separate fields. Let's say we want those in the same field for some reason, right? We want first name and last name in one field. So what I can do is if I right click a table, it gives me the options to manipulate that table, right? Here's all my options. If I right click that, what I want is a new column. And then what you'll notice, and this is where we get into the formula writing, is this formula and this language is the exact same language as Excel. It's called DAX. And so what I need to do is what I'll call it full name. And then I can just write a DAX formula to pull those two into the same field. One nice feature again is autocomplete. So when I type first, it shows down here, obviously formula options available, but then also fields. So you'll see I need first reps, the sales reps table's first name field here. And then we can do an and we'll add a space in there. And then we do an and then if I type the last name, again, it finds last name. So what I've done there is just said, give me the first name, add a space, and then add the last name. And that field will be titled full name. So I hit enter there. You'll notice that when I drag that in, right, I've got, drag these in here just so you can see that. First name, last name, full name, right? So I created this full name based on these with a simple DAX formula is what I did there. So again, that's the type of, when I say formula writing, you can't do that in the Power BI service. You cannot do what I just did if you connect to your data directly in the web. You have to do that from the desktop, right? So that's the value in doing it here, is this type of stuff. So so there's that, and I'll again delete that now that I've shown that. But let's go ahead and look at, let's say we want to know, I don't know, let's say the sales rep and the total number of samples they've given by week. And I just know that in my data, I have a week name here. So I know I can slice it that way. And because I related the tables, what I can do is we'll just keep it a table for now, and I'll show you how you can just switch a visual on the fly to maybe a bar chart or something without much effort. So what I'm going to do is take the full name field I just created. So there's my full name. And then let's say samples given, there's a quantity field here, right? And so if I select that, you'll notice again that it's assuming I want to see the sum, which is actually accurate in this case. I want to see the total of the samples given by sales rep. And so that sum is accurate, right? I could also do an average, right? Very quickly do an average, and you can see that data change on the fly, but let's leave it at sum. And then The other thing I can do is when I add the week name dimension in here, it now separates that by week, right? So I have Britta Simons week 1 and week 2, right? And this is just a flat table. And so this isn't a great way to look at this piece of data, the way it's broken up here. So what I can quickly do, if you notice up here on the right, is I've got in my visualizations, I'm using table, but there's also a matrix, which think about it as kind of a pivot table, right? So now what you'll see is I can do something like that. And it just on the fly says, I think this is the way you wanted to see this data in this new visual, right? Visualization, right? Could do this, right? So now I've got Britta week 1, week 2 in my columns, and then their total. This gives me a little bit better idea there. The other thing I can do is sort this on the fly, just like in Excel, and you put some sorting and filters in place. So now I have it sorted by their overall total here on the right. Another nice thing in my analysis, my analyst past brings up is I always like to see percentages. How is this weighted? And so one cool thing we can do is now that we're in this, we have this data this way. Let me go back to our table, and I'm actually going to remove name. So here's our total, just our straight total. What I can do is I can actually drop the quantity over there again, and I can show it as a % of the grand total, right? With just a couple clicks. Now I have to write a formula. I can write a formula for that, a DAX Excel type formula. But some of the built-in features allow me that I don't have to do that, and I can now see that Ryan is giving out about 28% of our samples overall, right? It's very quick, a quick and dirty way to do that. So it's pretty easy visualization to pull together. So so that's probably good for now. So if we want to leave that there. Another nice thing to see might be maybe we want to see. I mean, trending, we only have a couple weeks here, so maybe not the most valuable, but if we do, maybe something like a bar chart that shows a similar type of data, maybe by product. So maybe we want to see what are the products that we're giving samples out on, right? So maybe we want the higher margin products to be the ones we're giving out samples of more. So we want to see what that looks like. So we can quickly again go here and put our brand in place, and then just put the samples, if you recall, were tied into the product here. So we can use that same quantity and see by product now, right? I'm sorry, by brand, what's the count of the quantity of samples we're giving out, right? And so quickly gives me and ranks this from descending order. And if I hover, you can see all the visuals are interactive, right? So I can see my quantities when I hover, but if I don't want to have to hover to see the quantities, you'll notice this option here. These are my options for the data I'm seeing and I want to use, dragging and dropping fields in. Paintbrush, as you probably know in the Microsoft world, is formatting. So when I go there, you see this data labels. I can turn those on, and now my numbers just appear, right? So again, if you've played with this kind of stuff in Excel, it's really the location and finding your way around more than anything, but all very configurable. And here's the other thing. All of these visuals can interact with one another. So for instance, if I drill on or click on Ryan's name here, it's going to highlight him in this table, but what it's also going to do, because I have my relationships in place, it's going to filter this data down here to only the drugs or the brands that Ryan provided the samples for. So we'll see that in action. So see what happens when I click Ryan. I can release that so you can see it happen again. When I click that, now I'm only looking at Ryan, but I'm only looking at Ryan down here too. So out of our total, what is that, 202 glycoprotein samples, Ryan was 60 of those. So the darkened area are the ones that Ryan took on, right? So, and again, I can control and click and highlight Julia as well. Again, pretty standard control click will highlight multiple items for you, just like it does in other apps. But the same thing here. So now I'm seeing Ryan and Julia. They basically make up 50%, right, of our total. And here's how that's distributed across the items, right? So, and then to release those filters, you just click them. You just click that table, and now it's released, and we've got all our data back, right? So, again, that's looking at by brand, right? And so, it may be wise also to look at that by doctor, right? So I guess one thing here, changing visuals, and I'm not an enormous proponent of pie charts, only because as you start to get, in this area, how do I know which one of these is more than the other? It's just easier to see that if it's a bar chart or a table or something like that. So basically, but you see how easy it is to change the visual. It just, I click the different visual up here in my visualizations bar, and it changes for me without an issue. So now we're back to where we were. And so now let's look at these by doctor, maybe a similar analysis. And so again, what I did there is just copy and paste that same visual, just highlight it, Control C, Control V, copy and paste. You can do the same thing here, copy visual and paste it. So now all I have to do is update the data here. And I don't want brand I still want quantity as my value, but I don't need brand as my axis. I just need the doctor, right? And again, we only have first name, last name here because I didn't add that concatenated field. So here it's by doctor, last name, who's receiving our samples, right? And so again, now we start to get a better picture of if I want to cross filter around these, I can start to see, well, I want to know who's getting my particular brands, right? Who's getting those? So my first brand here, again, glycoprotein. Now I can see which doctors are getting that, who were giving those, which doctors were giving those samples to. So I can see that, all of these doctors got none. Oh, really only 3 doctors got samples of that product. Maybe that distribution isn't good enough. Maybe we needed to have that more doctors' hands, right? So you start to can play with the data here a little bit and start to understand a little bit more as you go along. So again, here we're just showing by doctor, by brand. This is by salesperson, just a list here that we're showing there. And so I want to do a little bit of labeling so that, again, these aren't terribly descriptive, right? So this is quantity by brand, but you'll notice what I can do is if I were to, I can either rename this value. So it's quantity here, but I have the ability to rename it. And that's only renaming it for this visual. It doesn't rename the value over here. So this feature came in probably about a year ago. And before this feature, it was a bit of a nightmare, quite frankly, to kind of get your labels and chart labels how you wanted them. It was just not as easy. But now, again, I can change quantity here and maybe I can just call it total samples. And what you'll see is I rename that total samples and it renamed this total samples. So it pulled that name in here and says, okay, now we're looking at total samples by brand. And because I didn't change this quantity field to total samples, I would have to change it again on each visual. If I'm doing the change at the visual level, I have to do it for every visual, right? Now, I'm sure some of you probably realize that the smart thing to do would have been to, again, if I add quantity as my value in both places here, if I change that name here to total samples, now that's the name of my field in my data model. So what you'll notice is now that one changes it in both places because the source name was changed. So again, those are just the types of things you'll learn as you go along. There's no perfect way to do it. In some instances, you may want to leave, your raw name the same, and others maybe not, right? You want to change it at the visual level. So I've changed that. Maybe I want to make the text black. Again, I can do that. I've got here's my data labels. Here's my title that's on, and there it is, total samples, right? It's auto-populated. Let's change that to black just to make it a little bit darker. Same thing here. We'll make that one black. Oh, I made the background black there. Don't want to do that. Revert that to default. Make that one black there. And then this one, maybe we'll just add a title to. Here, title's off, but I can turn the title on and say, maybe this is sample distribution by salesperson. That was probably too long to fit in the visual. That's okay. So there you go, right? And there it is. And we can make that, again, the font color black and stand a little bit. So again, there's a lot you can play with here from a formatting and perspective and things like that. So we have about 15 minutes left. What I want to do is, the last thing I'll do is, while it doesn't seem like it's terribly valuable, when we start to show some branding and just put a little bit of formatting around our reports and make that consistent, adoption seems to go up. that folks kind of understand the reporting they're looking at. It's got your company look and feel. It's familiar, those kinds of things. So you'll notice that I can also, like I can add a company logo quickly here. And what I'll do is go here, and you'll see it's going to look for JPEGs and PNG files and things like that. So if I click that, there's my company logo I created, and then I can resize that maybe and put it up here. And then I can also maybe just add a text box and put a label for the report as well. So again, text box options up there, and maybe I just say sample analysis, right? And I can resize that. I'll move it over here, maybe. If I can grab that field. There we go. Here, center it, font a bit bigger, bold, whatever it might be, right? So I can say this is my sample analysis report. Maybe that's better suited over here. Okay, so we've got our sample analysis and our logo in there now. And again, as you saw, I'm going to Control S and save this file, and it's just going to save back in the same location it was in. So now the next step is we want to share that, right? We want to publish this so other folks can see it, whether we're publishing it to our sales team or whoever it might be. You've got this publish button here. And the one thing to notice is you'll see I am not signed in. So this is what will happen the first time you do this, or if you're not signed in to Power BI Desktop. Again, it needs to know who you are so it knows where it's publishing this data to. So what I'm going to do is just log into my GadellNet account. It's going to prompt you for your username and password. And these would just be your domain, most often going to be your domain credentials. But now what you'll notice is it knows who I am because it knows my tenant. And it says, where would you like to publish this to? And so this is where we get into sharing is all of these are workspaces in the Power BI service, which we'll see here in just a minute. You've got your own personal workspace, but then you have all of these other workspaces where, in theory, right, you're collaborating with other folks. So maybe Adam and Carrie are working on something together. We would both be members of that workspace, and we can both publish reports to it and share within it and all of those things. So kind of think of it as a group, right? So I just happen to have all of these together, or all these workspaces in my account, associated with my account. So I'm just going to publish it to the Power BI demo. I selected it, turns gray. I'm going to publish it to that workspace in the Power BI service. And then that's what you're going to see here. It's going to say, hey, we're publishing. And again, the larger your report is, the more time that's going to take. As you see, we don't have many records and much data, so it's pretty quick. It'll give you a link directly to that report. But what I want to do is open Power BI, the Power BI service, and navigate to it to kind of give you a feel for the navigation there. So if you want to get straight to it, you click here, and it's going to open your default browser, ask you to log in, and drop you straight into that report. But what I want to do is, again, if I go to app, show you the service, app.powerbi.com. Sign in. So I have my account. Again, it's going to ask me to authenticate. I'm probably already authenticated yet because I'm using Edge. So in theory, it's going to pass you through authentication, right? And then what you're going to notice is this list of, here's my dashboard. Again, a somewhat new feature for Power BI. It's giving you a dashboard. Your navigation's down here to the left, your main navigation. Favorites, you can favorite reports and dashboards. Your recently accessed, you can see I've got a lot there. Apps is a concept that each workspace can have an app. And so we can actually publish the app to that Power BI demo workspace here in a moment if we'd like. And then what you'll notice is here's all my workspaces. So when I create on workspaces, these are the same workspaces that the desktop tool asked me where I'd like to publish to, right? So here it is. Here's that Power BI demo workspace. And when I click on it, here's my hierarchy within Power BI, right? We've got data sets, which back reports, and then you can have multiple reports roll into a dashboard. And so these are all clickable, right? And it shows you what you've got available. So here's my reports, and here's our report here, Power BI demo. Is that what I renamed it? Yep, so there it is. So there's that report. We just created in the desktop tool. There it is. There's the desktop. But now it's in the service, right? And so now what I can do is share that to other folks, and they can consume it here, and they don't have to know anything about the Power BI, the file it creates in the background, the Power BI desktop, or any of that stuff, right? They're not the data manager. They want to see the report output. Well, here you go. So here it is. And again, this is all interactive, just like it was in the desktop. If I click on this brand, it shows me who's selling it and what doctors are receiving it, right? It's kind of the context of this here. So again, that's filtering there. One thing I do want to show you, I'm going to go back to the desktop and we'll republish this. The option to add filters to a page I think is important. So what I'll do is I'm going to take from my samples given, this visual is called a slicer. It's a filter, think of it that way. And bear with my formatting here as we just try to get through this for our last few minutes. I'm going to put week name in my filter. So now what I can do is just, it gives me a way to quickly select between weeks. Maybe I want to see a week over week, or, or by week. So I can say just for week 1, what's my data? Now week 2, what's my data? Or again, I can release those and show all. But that's what a slicer is. And again, there's some formatting. Do you want it in a drop down or do you want it, not in a drop down? So again, what I'll do is this is for the purpose of showing you the update function. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to hit publish again. I'm going to publish it back to Power BI demo. And it's going to say, do you want to overwrite, right? Do you want to replace what's there? I'm going to say yes. When this completes, I'll refresh on the other side and we'll see that this new filter I just added, new slicer, what they call it, I added will be there. So I'm going to refresh there. I'm likely going to have to go through a browser refresh to make that appear. And there it is, right? So that's how quick it happens. I want to add a visual, change a visual. Someone asks you for an update. Can you make this color, add this piece of data? It's that simple, right? And now again, I can filter to week 1. And there's my week 1 samples. Week 2, there's my week 2 samples. So again, there's a lot under the hood here, but the point is from the ecosystem perspective, it's not terribly complex. It's not scary. You just dig in. And one thing, the cool thing is no one can break your data from this side, right? This is read only on the Power BI service. If you're in the Power BI desktop creating a report file, then yeah, folks have access to that and they kind of play around and they get turned sideways. You'd have to fix that, right? Or the report's going to be broken. But if you've published it here and they're digesting it, they have free reign. They can do whatever they'd like. They cannot change data here. They cannot edit your data. It's read only. And then the nice thing is here, even if they get turned around, there's this, again, I say new feature because when I started, these features weren't available, but you'll notice this reset to default is ticked here. It's because my default report is this, right? But as soon as I change a filter here, if I say up, I'm highlight week 2, this gives me a hint that, hey, you've got a filter set. So for some reason, I think I'm seeing the wrong data here. I can just hit reset to default, and it's going to take me back to my default report that I published, right? So again, lots under the hood here, but very intuitive once you start working with it. And those are really the keys, right? Get started, get off the starting line, and then dabble a little bit. Even if you don't have anything active you need to be working on or someone's asking you to produce, just get in and play around a little bit to stay familiar because the tool gets updated every month. Microsoft pushes out updates every month to the Power BI desktop tool. And so there's all kinds of new features coming in. And so that helps you stay familiar, but then also, keeps the saw sharp, right? Is just get in here. And what you find is that folks that don't use it for a while and come back, you kind of never get out of the learning curve. You got to get over the hump a little bit to know your way around. And then it becomes very easy. It becomes like riding a bike. So anyway, from an ecosystem perspective, that's that. The desktop and the service, how those work together. And then again, I can just share this report if I'd like, right? There's a share button right here. I can share this. And again, if I start typing, it's going to auto discover. It's going to find Carrie. I can share this to her. And there's a report link. And now assuming she has a Power BI license, she logs into the service and she'll have access to that report. Never has to know anything about the desktop file side of it. She only wants to see the data and she'll be able to see it doing that. So sharing is pretty straightforward. Now, again, devil's in the detail, how you need to share, how your organization's structured, that all matters. But once you have that defined, the sharing is pretty straightforward and the management of that is pretty straightforward. So we got about 5 minutes. What I want to do is jump back to the PowerPoint because I think there's some valuable, the next question we usually get is, hey, where can I start to learn, right? Someone that's going to be in the details and there's someone that's going to be managing data and playing and digging around. Where do I train? Where do I start? And so there are a lot of resources out there. This is a list of resources that I tend to lean on over and over, right? So certainly PowerBI.com that's where you're going to log in and download tools and all those things directly from Microsoft, right? But then there's a few other resources that what I've tried to do here is give you an idea of what they're providing, right? So SQL BI and Radicad, those are two pretty popular ones, and they have all of the above. They have training tools and tips as well. They offer online training. Some have free training. I think SQL BI has a free DAX training that I've recommended to folks. I went through it. It's a video course, but it helps you um, learn, right? Get off the ground, and then certainly have paid training on site or events, things like that. But certainly accessible from your machine or your computer. Power BI tips is one that they could do a lot around theming and again tools and tips, but again themes and templates and things for report layouts. Pretty good with that. That's a pretty good one there. Power Pivot Pro is more on the data modeling side, so tips on data modeling specifically. I want to know how to do this with date fields, or I want to know how to relate this data or get to this information. Good, they're good there. The BI accountant's one I tend to lean on because we get a lot of asks for accounting, right? Data and accounting reporting. So that's when I lean on here and there. And then of course our blog from time to time we've got some info out there, whether it's just tools in the marketplace, how to find the right tool, to tips at certain times where we found a tip that we haven't really been able to find anywhere else, or we've put maybe a process together to handle data a way that we haven't been able to find elsewhere, that we kind of solved the problem without anyone else solving it first, right? Or we found a better way we think to solve it. Oftentimes we'll put that on the blog too out there as well. So from a resources perspective, this is these are the top ones. Again, you go out there and search Power BI training or whatever, you're going to find all kinds of things. But these are the ones, even today, as I've been years into using Power BI and thousands of hours, I'm sure I lean on these day in and day out. The other nice thing about Power BI, a couple points before we wrap up here, are the community. It's community driven, and so I'll show you that quickly here. If I go to powerbi.com and I need help something, they've got this community, right, where you've got the ideas. So they're an idea driven product. So if you want to see a new feature, you recommend it, it gets upvoted, and then it potentially makes it into the product. But the nice thing is you got forums too. So if you have a particular issue or a particular formula, again here you've got 295,000 posts regarding data modeling. It's likely that someone's run into the same issue you have before. And a quick Google search, and these are going to rise to the top of your Google search. And then you dig in and see, is this exactly what I'm trying to do? Okay, here's the solution for it. And the solution's right there for you. So that's always a good one when you have questions. Power BI, you can never go wrong with community.powerbi.com. Or again, if you just go to Power BI and hit the community link, it'll take you here. So again, a lot of information here, but I'm hopeful that, again, the goal of today was to show you it's not scary. It's you just got to get your feet wet, get in there, have a couple tools, but whether it be us in combination with some of these other blogs and platforms out there to help you get your feet wet and get off the ground. I think it's I really like working the tool. I love it. I do it day in and day out. As Carrie said, I've got multiple projects going right now. Sometimes we're running the full project. Sometimes we're cleaning up after somebody else made a mess. Sometimes folks just need a nudge, right? And they need to say, hey, here's what we're trying to get. Can you give us a few tips, just a little bit of time to kind of bump us over the edge? And so we run the gamut, right? And so with that, here's really what we focus on. The strategy and architecture, those can be very philosophical or those can be very defined, right? Hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you see other folks doing? To we need to put a platform in place that does X, Y, and Z. Help us design it, right? Data integration and ETL, so extracting data from systems and kind of doing integration work there, loading it into databases so it can be reported on. Some of the back-end modeling, we'd say, that maybe is too big to happen in Power BI itself, that needs to happen in a database somewhere. Reporting and dashboard development, as you just saw, a very rudimentary example of that, I would say. Training, of course, and then maintenance and support, right? Because, again, the tool's always changing. So if we need to, if you've got some reporting out there that needs structure and maintenance, we can certainly help there, both from a process perspective and actually doing maintenance, right? So for today, I'm right at an hour. I could talk for hours and hours and hours and would love to. I mean, if there's ways we can help, certainly reach out. Myself, Carrie, your account manager, if you have one, reach out, and let's have a chat and talk about how we can help. So I did see a question, and Carrie responded, yeah, well, we can make this presentation, a copy of this available, so you have, certainly those links are helpful, right? A lot of the other stuff you can find, if you search around on the web or on our website, but that will certainly help, as well as the recording and the video. So with that, Carrie, anything else, any housekeeping before we drop off here?
No, and actually Callie had responded, but
oh, it was
yeah,
Callie, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It shows it's me. It's perfectly fine. So yeah, so we will have the recording available, and there aren't a ton of people on this call, so I mean we are a minute over. But are there any questions that anybody has for Adam while he's on the line? Again, and I mean if there aren't, that's fine, and we will be sending the recording out. But please, if there are any questions or if anything was unclear, we can wait a minute, stay on for a little bit and answer any questions.
Yeah, and or just, again, my email, adam.state@GadellNet, and certainly feel free to flip me a note there as well. Mm-hmm. If you think of something after, you can always come straight to me, and then we'll figure out if I'm the best resource, right off the bat or not. But I'm certainly happy to be the front line there if you want to go that route as well. So.
All right. Well, I'll take that silence as no questions.
Yeah. Well,
but anyway,
thanks, everyone.
Adam.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, Adam, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. This was very helpful, great information. And everybody on the line, we'll go ahead and get this out to you guys. And just like Adam said, if you have any questions after the fact, which that happens to me, you think through it, you process through it a little bit. If you have any questions after the fact, then just shoot either your account manager or Adam a note. And thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know you guys are crazy, for joining, and we will all talk soon. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.